Okay, we're gonna begin. Tonight is my yearly talk about difficult conversations. You and I have to have a conversation. And I was thinking about this last night and this morning, and I realized that I talk about it like everyone has the same struggles, and I know that that's not true. This is kind of a normal human thing that we do, where we think that everybody has the same issues and just has the same beliefs and all that as us, and we encounter somebody who has a different experience, and we're like, what? What's that? What's wrong with you? And I realized that there are probably a decent amount of people who just don't have difficult conversations, or at least what I am usually referring to as a difficult conversation, because they don't mind the confrontation. They don't mind kind of getting in someone's face and like telling them how it is. And uh, for me, that's usually the difficult part of the conversation. I am by nature not a really confrontational person, and so even just bringing up something that seems like a confrontation is the difficult part. But for everybody, even those by nature uber confrontational people, there's something that's a difficult conversation to be had. So the challenge of this week is to have a difficult conversation, to have it ASAP, because it's the conversation that you've been putting off. And you may have been putting it off because you've been worried about the repercussions. You've been worried about how this person is going to see you, or how it's going to change your relationship, or you just don't like the act of confronting people. Some people just don't like to talk to people in general, and I totally get that. But I want to talk not just about the difficult conversation, but the idea of difficult things and how we can flow with them in general. So the article that I wrote for this month's newsletter is The Art of the Difficult Conversation. I think that's what I called this talk last year. And to have it be an art, there's got to be some flow. And to be able to flow with difficulty really is a crucial part of our practice. It's a huge aim that we have in everything that we do. And we're all going to have difficulties. We're all going to have ups and downs. And some people are going to have much more difficult times than others. And some people are going to have, it's like, some of us have just a super charmed existence. And it's like even a tiny little thing feels like the end of the world because we're just not used to it. So we kind of get used to what we're used to. And then anything that throws us out of that situation is our difficulty and our challenge. And of course, flowing is easy when it's easy. And, if everything were easy, then we would not have the opportunity to grow and get better. There is no growth without friction and the work. So we can still make it seem or feel easy, even when these things are happening that I think objectively speaking, most people would say that's not easy. But with a mindset shift, we can have this, not only this appreciation for the challenge, but also the ability to really see it as something that we can deal with ease, and therefore to flow with it. So I like to say this all the time, but a big thing that we learn to do in martial arts is to turn our challenges into opportunities. What we see as a difficult thing, when we see it as difficult, it feels like we're pushing up against a wall or crashing into a wall. And it does not feel very good. It does not invite us to flow. Running up against a wall is not flowing, right? Even water has a hard time flowing when it hits up against the wall. So what we want to do is recognize that when we're running into our difficulty and we feel this experience of this feels like this resistance. I'm resisting this. And we want to try to shift things and let it go. And so when we see the wall as not a thing that is stopping us, but we see the wall as an opportunity to shift, or an opportunity to be creative, right? What am I going to do? I'm not just going to keep running into it. I got to go over it or under it or around it, maybe dig a tiny hole and go through it. But When we see the wall as an opportunity to flow, that's when we get creative and we are then able to flow. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened. I mean, it happens probably literally every time I practice. And we were just doing jujitsu, so that's, you know, some of the stuff that comes to mind most readily. One of the students was asking about being a smaller partner and like, what do you do in this situation? And she was asking, I think at least a little bit sarcastically, but like, what am I supposed to do as a smaller partner? It's a disadvantage in jujitsu. Am I supposed to like go home and eat more and like try to bulk up? And no, that's not the answer. You play to your strengths. You play to what you can do better. And when you have this feeling of flow or this attitude of dealing with the challenge in a creative way, then that's what just kind of naturally comes from it. I had a specific experience once, I mean, 100 times, 1,000 times, but the one that I remember and talk about all the time was I was grappling with a student who was about the same experience level as me, and he was better at some stuff and I was better at some stuff, but he and I were in this weird position. I was just kind of sitting like almost in guard, and he just like put his hand on my ankle like this. And I could not remember anybody ever doing that to me. And I just like looked at him and I had this experience of being stopped, right? My brain went up into a wall and there was no going around it. It was just like, what is this? I'm stuck. And he, after seeing me totally confused, helped me out for a second, and he's like, oh, try doing this. And he's like, when I do this, what you can do is actually grab my wrist and then do this thing. And he showed me this, you know, like a sweep that I pulled off. And I was like, that's a great technique. Wait a minute. That's an amazing just shift of mindset, right? The grab, we think of it as a bad thing. We think of it as like an attack. And really what it is an opportunity. They're giving us something to play with. They're giving us something to flow with. And this really is the kind of feeling that we want to get in our practice as much as possible. Even with, and especially with those real challenges, those really challenging partners or situations where we feel stuck, that's where there is the greatest opportunity to grow and to flow, right? So you will notice this in your practice. You'll notice it in Tai Chi, you'll notice it in Kung Fu, you'll notice it for sure in your meditation practice, that your greatest challenges are going to be your greatest opportunities. And when you see them that way, it just jogs you right out of that feeling of being stuck and into that feeling of flow and that opportunity to flow. So in meditation, now Catherine was pointing out a different reading from the same book, but there's one that I like to refer to in Zen Mind, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, not Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which is this one. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the author talks about mind weeds. And so he talks about this idea of you're meditating and you have this thought that just kind of sticks and it keeps coming back. And the feeling of this is like if you were gardening and you have this persistent weed that just keeps growing back and you keep like trying to chop it and it grows back and it grows back. And this is what will happen in meditation is, you know, if we're having a decent meditation, maybe we will let it go. If we're having a less decent meditation, we'll resist and fight against it. And that's all good until it's not, which is like a second later when the thought comes right back. And so what we want to be able to do is, instead of getting upset at that thought and starting to resist it, is to treat it like it's a good thing. So what he says is this mind weed is an opportunity to nourish your meditation. And again, I don't think this is how actually it works with weeds, but let's pretend that it does. He says if you dig up the weed from its roots and you bury it, then it will become food for the plants. And I think most weeds will just grow right back up, but you get the idea, right? This thing can turn into food, right? And in the garden of your mind in meditation, the the food that kind of, it keeps your meditation interesting for sure, those thoughts that keep coming back up, but also the opportunity to grow. This is the fertilizer for your growth in meditation, is those thoughts that keep coming back, right? If it's just easy, then there's not really the growth there. Can you imagine if you sat for your meditation and you had zero thoughts and it was just like, you just sit and you're just enlightened and it's like that? I mean, how terrible would that be? Because you didn't get the opportunity to really grow from it, but it would also be really amazing and you would be a Buddha. But what is realistically going to happen is those mind weeds. So when we have this experience, thinking of the mind weed as food or sustenance, thinking of the challenge as food that helps us grow, is really what helps it to become an easy kind of feeling, right? So in meditation, what you'll do is you will not bury that thought, because that sounds like repression, but you will think of it like, this persistent thought is food for my meditation. This persistent thought is a challenge that helps me grow. And what that does in that moment, and probably will persist for the rest of the meditation, is the thought or other thoughts come up, and instead of resisting and fighting, you just take it in, you accept it, and then it will be much easier to let go once you've accepted it like that. I pulled out this book because it's like every story is kind of about this on some level. I had one in particular that I wanted to read and I forgot what it was, so I might just flip to a random page. No, I know what. Well, look, there are 100 of these. The one that I like to tell all the time is the one that I'm going to start with, at least. So this is The Muddy Road, and it really gives you kind of, when you think of the muddy road, you think of like the challenge, and you feel this like slog feeling. And this is the story. Tenzin and Ekido were once traveling together down a muddy road. A heavy rain was still falling. Coming around a bend, they met a lovely girl in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross the intersection. "Come on, girl," said Tenzin at once. Lifting her in his arms, he carried her over the mud, and he set her down. Ekido did not speak again until that night when they reached a lodging temple. Then he no longer could restrain himself. "We monks don't go near females," he told Tenzin, "especially not young and lovely ones. It is dangerous. Why did you do that?" "I left the girl there," said Tenzin. "Are you still carrying her?" And this sense of ease that the one monk kind of took this situation with, where he sees it, he's just like, this is what we're going to do, just like, hup, carries her over and then sets her down and then carries along his merry way, is obviously a starkly different kind of feeling to the way that the second monk handled it, which was like burning him up inside, and like, and not only in that situation, but then for the rest of the day after. And he was really carrying her and carrying that situation and carrying that angst with him the whole time. And there really can be this feeling with our practice where, of course, the first couple of times that we encounter something like that, it might really feel like a slog. It might feel like a real challenge that stops us, but you get used to it. And it can become this kind of thing where you really just do what needs to be done and move on. And it doesn't feel like any kind of big deal. It's just done. And this is one of the main points I wanted to make about the difficult conversation, which is you should just get it over with, because you don't want to be like the monk who's holding on to it all day to the point where he can no longer hold it in and he has to explode with this, near anger. I mean, for a monk, he was probably like, how could you do that? But this is what happens to us. We hold on to this so long that it gets worse and worse. And, of course, there are all the negative side effects of stress and all that, but it literally just doesn't help logistically for that conversation to hold on to it. it only makes things worse. So one of the best things that I have noticed for myself, which I was absolutely the #1 procrastinator. I'm afraid to have this conversation, so I'm just going to put it off for as long as possible. Like maybe when I'm on my deathbed, I'll finally have it. And you're just holding on to it. And then what are you doing? Like the mud that's building up on your shoes, you end up with all of this junk that you're carrying around. And that can have a really negative effect on us just on a day-to-day basis, but for sure with our interactions with that person with whom we're supposed to be having this conversation. And in that conversation itself, it's like I really built it up to the point where it's such a big deal and it feels like so bad. Whereas if we had just had it, it's done with, it's light, and we feel light once we've had it. This idea of holding on and having these attachments, right? A lot of this is we are attached to the way that we think that it's going to go, right? We think that the conversation is going to go like this, and we think that the person is going to take it this way. And by the way, all these assumptions that we're making, all these attachments that we have are to negative things that are really stopping us. And so if we're able to let go of that, then again, we're able to flow better in the conversation. When we carry this baggage into the conversation, it makes the conversation literally feel heavy, and it makes us stuck whenever we are attached. And we're attached in our martial arts practice. We can be physically attached and feeling tense and rigid. Maybe it's in Tai Chi and we're like unable to flow. Maybe it's in Jiu-Jitsu and you're unable to move with whatever your partner is giving you. Then we are really just ineffective and inefficient. So when we let go of those attachments, we flow and it feels easy. Related to this is having an agenda. One of the reasons that the conversation becomes so difficult and seems like such a big deal is because we really want it to go a certain way. So we may expect it to go a certain way, but we really want it to go this way, and so then we're attached to that. And when you enter into a conversation with an agenda, you've all experienced this where somebody else has a very clear agenda. You know, it feels like they're trying to sell you something or they're trying to pull one over on you. And it's like, it feels gross. It feels really just sticky and gross to have that conversation with somebody who clearly is trying to kind of force their agenda or their, you know, way that they want it to go on you. And that is something that we've got to be aware of and be able to let go of from our perspective. When we enter into this conversation with an agenda, oftentimes that is very clear for the other person. And it also is, you know, more baggage that we're holding on to. So what is kind of the opposite of having an agenda, where it's like we have it all set up in here how we want it to go, and we have all this, you know, stuff we want to say, and all of this, like, you know, script in our head that we're trying to follow. The opposite of that is just to listen. And I know that some of you guys are actors or have done acting in the past, and it's like the best actors are the ones who really just listen rather than being up in their head, trying to say like, what's my next line? Oh yeah, I gotta wait until they say this and then I gotta say my thing. And we're all doing that in conversation so often. It's like we have the next line that we're trying to say. At the very best, for most of us, when we're listening, what we're not doing is really listening to the other person and listening to what their experience is, what they're going through. What we're usually listening for is my chance to talk, or listening to what I think about what the other person is saying, usually so that I can get my rebuttal ready. And all of that, you know, kind of takes us in the same direction versus literally just listen. And it's like, I'm not listening for any reason to try to, you know, flip your words against you and or you know, take it back in the direction where I'm going back to my agenda. Just literally listening, and not only to the words that this person is saying, but to what their experience is. This is one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard about anything ever, but definitely in this world of conversations, and like somebody's upset, and maybe we caused it, maybe they're just upset, but the way that we can make this disappear almost instantly is such a simple, genius thing. You literally listen, and then you make the other person understand, it's very clear to them that you actually are hearing them. And the way you do that is by repeating, if possible, word for word, exactly what they said, and explaining what you believe to be the emotion behind it and their experience that they're having. And if we get it wrong, then we invite the other person to tell us what they're really feeling. And then we do it again. And we say, this is what you say, and this is what you're feeling. And when the other person really gets that you are really getting them, when it's obvious that you're actually listening and understanding them, like, this is one of the most beautiful feelings that a human being can have, is truly being listened to. And it's unfortunately such a rarity, right? Our life is just filled with people who are trying to sell us something and tell us what they think, and cut us off on the freeway rather than just letting us merge peacefully. And it's just makes the difficulty and the upset and the baggage and all that stuff just melt away. It's so nice and so difficult to do if you're stuck up here in your own head with your agenda or your baggage and all that. So no agenda, listen, and just be totally honest when it is time for you to say what there is to say. So to do this, you have to be able to listen to yourself. And this is really what meditation is on some level. And if we are meditating and recognizing certain persistent thoughts, that we can think of as a good thing, because we are really listening and understanding ourselves. And what you could even do is, you don't really want to do this in the middle of meditation because it's not really meditation, but if you have to, okay, maybe journaling about it after, you like write down the thoughts you're having, like what's going on that you're struggling with, and like write down your emotion behind it. You're doing the same kind of thing for yourself. You're truly listening to yourself and understanding not only the thoughts, the upset, but like what is behind it. What's the emotion? What's the experience happening there? And if you can practice doing that with yourself, you can be assured you'll be much better doing that with somebody else. Now, what really does honesty sound like in a situation like this? Ooh, there's another great story. Let's see if I can find it very quickly. I'm going to ask Catherine to find it, and I don't think you're going to be able to find it because I have no idea what it's called. All right, I'm just going to tell the story. No, this is it. Okay. So this is at least related to this. Or no, I'm on the wrong page. Yeah, all right, here we go. I got it. Okay. It's called If You Love, Love Openly. 20 monks and one nun, who was named Eshun, were practicing meditation with a certain Zen master. And all these stories, these poor women are always outnumbered by these idiot monks. So Eshun was very pretty, even though her head was shaved and her dress plain. Several monks secretly fell in love with her. One of them wrote her a love letter, insisting upon a private meeting. Eshun did not reply. The following day, the master gave a lecture to the group, and when it was over, Eshun arose, addressing the one who had written her. I'm not going to point at any of you. If you really love me so much, come and embrace me now. That's the end of the story. And so, like, there's some level of honesty really that comes along with this monk, what he was trying to do, and like write this letter, and I'm sure he thought something great was going to come from this, but really it was kind of sneaky, and this is the way that it comes across, right? And so Eshun's point is like, just be open. And to her point, like if this was really just an open thing and somebody is just being honest with feelings rather than trying to hide and, you know, hold on to it or fight against it or whatever, you know, there would probably be openness and forgiveness and it would all be fine. And, you know, they're probably not gonna get married. They're a monk and a nun, but it still kind of has this nice, clean-ish resolution, as opposed to like I'm sneaking notes under your door and like trying to sneak around. And in our conversations, it really feels like that sometimes. We're trying to like sneak up on it, and we're trying to kind of pretend that we feel a certain way when really we feel another way, and that's really where, again, things get sticky. So we got to first be totally honest with ourselves, really truly recognize how we feel about this thing and this person and this situation. And then when we're in the conversation, one of the best things to do is to just say, like, and this is something that I've tried in the beginning, it's really scary, but it works so well that it becomes super easy to do the next time. You just say, like, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of bringing this up because I'm worried about how it's going to impact our relationship. I'm worried about bringing this up because I'm afraid that you're going to not like me anymore. It's going to, you know, create some kind of friction between us. I'm worried about this because I really care about you and because I'm really worried about, you know, losing a friend and, you know, maybe ultimately I'm worried about being alone and being abandoned or whatever. And so, you know, there's a level that maybe you don't have to go all the way down to. It's like, and this is because when I was 5 years old, my parents left me alone at preschool for 2 hours. But as long as you know that about yourself, it is a really useful thing to be able to bring into these conversations. And so when we're totally honest and we're honest about kind of our shortcomings and why it is so difficult for us, that will, you know, in a not sneaky way at all, just really endear us to the person that this conversation is to be had with. But also just like clear things out and really open this other person up to be honest on the same level. They don't have to be, and oftentimes they won't, but it kind of starts things off in a very clean way and invites the conversation to just stay totally on the up and up. This honesty is so brilliant and so important. So the practical advice for the difficult conversation is have it today. Like as soon as this meditation is over, you should just go call whoever it needs to be called. Do not text or email this. It does not work. It works the same way as that note that was slipped under the door for Eshin. You gotta just talk. And when you're doing that, make sure that you're not bringing any baggage into it. There's no agenda. You're literally just listening and being totally honest. That's the practical advice. Now, meditation, maybe right before, probably not during, and after is not going to be as helpful either for the conversation itself. It can be helpful for like a debriefing for yourself, but meditate before and create this clearing that you step into. And then you just invite this other person into this clearing. And it's just nice and honest, and there's no agenda. And if you can meditate and kind of recognize what you're about to try to bring into it, let it go, and just be totally present. This is useful for a difficult conversation. This is useful for all the difficult conversations that we have going on all the time in our own minds. So in your meditation tonight, this is going to be difficult because of what I've been talking about, but this is not an invitation to just sit and think about all the difficult conversations that you need to have and start stressing about it, because I'm gonna ring the bell and you're gonna be like, where's my bell, by the way? Great. I'm gonna ring the bell and you're gonna be like, I was not meditating at all. I was just thinking about stressful conversations. The opportunity here is to just let all of that go and remember that if it's something that really needs to be said, a conversation that needs to be had, or something that needs to be dealt with, it will be there waiting for you when your meditation is over. There is no need to sit there and stew in it and stress about it. Just let it go back to this clear space, and the next thought that comes, whatever it's about, accept it, and then let it go. Sit comfortably. So I'll go over posture while I get my stuff out here. I like to sit in Seiza on a bench, but sitting on those things, cross-legged might be better. It's whatever is comfortable. If you want to sit in Seiza, you can also try flipping the cushion up like on its end. And what's important is, thank you, ma'am. What's important is that you do not have your knees sticking up high above your hips, because that will make your legs fall asleep. You also want your knees and your hips to kind of be in generally a comfortable, aligned position. The hands are upturned at the hips with your shoulders rolled back and your chin parallel to the ground. So you have this very solid feeling of, you're like a mountain and you are just immovable. You're not going to tip. You're not going to move during meditation. Close eyes. Your eyes are upturned, and you can actually visualize the point between your eyebrows, and that will help your eyes naturally raise up. And that position is associated with a raised consciousness. It actually helps us to raise the consciousness and let go of the everyday consciousness or the sleepy consciousness. Your eyes are down. And from here, relax and watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. When your mind wanders, just accept that thought, let it go, and return gently back to the breath.